back live in the studio here in WLCN. The program is Viewpoint. Our guests here this morning, besides Mrs. Busby to my right, Sally Litterly, our county clerk, and Steve Siltman, Logan County Paramedics Association. Let's hand the baton back to Mrs. Litterly for a minute, because she has some things that she wants to bring on, and then she's going to kind of segment into the very important issue we have in this election coming up here.
You have a couple other referenda you were going to...
Actually, there's one more. There's 3 total referenda on the ballot. And the last one is one of the guests that you have here today that is going to talk about it, and that is in regard to a county-wide ambulance referendum, increasing it by 5.30% over last year. And the reason we have that specific kind of wording is because we are a tax-capped county, and we have to say exactly how much over it's going to be. I'll let Steve talk a little bit more in length about that, but one thing I wanted to note for individuals that are out there, that the ambulance levy is actually on the county's levy. In the county we have general fund, highway fund, and there's actually an ambulance fund. That ambulance fund only asks for, this year they asked for $127,890. That's not very much money in a levy. No. A levy, of course, is generated from your real estate taxes. That they are only a portion of the $3,500,000 that is the county's entire levy. So the ambulance levy right now, which is what we're discussing and what's on the ballot, is only $127,000 right now to run their ambulance. So I will let you then pass on your next guest.
Well, I can't emphasize enough how important this election is to the Logan County Paramedics Association. Nobody has greater familiarity with what those professionals do than my co-partner here, Mrs. Busby. Unfortunately, she had a great need down for the last several years, so she can attest to that. Steve, welcome.
Thank you.
Let's, number one, Steve has been with the Logan County Paramedics Association a long time and does a great job in leading that organization, and we're really, really very lucky to have that availability in this county. So, Steve, let's tell us about this referendum you have coming up here, and why you need it. And certainly I don't ask that a negative question. I'm asking it so that you can explain to the customers, to the folks out there, how important this is.
Well, I think that the best way for me to speak about this referenda...
Steve, can you move the mic
right?
a little to you so that they can hear you better?
How about now?
Please,
Can you hear me better
you.
now?
Yeah.
Okay.
You're looking better, too.
I think the best way to speak of the history of it, and then we can begin to move forward. The county put before the voters in the 70s an ambulance tax levy that was, I believe, it started out as a 3-cent tax levy, 3 cents per $100 property valuation, and I think maybe a few years later it was actually jumped up to a 5-cent tax levy. But in the 70s, the ambulance service was administered by the hospital. During the 70s, the 80s, and the 90s, it was
before that it was the funeral homes.
And in those days, that 3-5 cent tax levy was certainly sufficient in order to subsidize the ambulance service for a number of reasons. One is that in those days, the ambulance call levels was around 1,800, 2,000 calls per year. And over the years, it's grown and grown to the point now where we're running 4,200 and some odd calls per year. And even though the population of the county has not grown, in fact, I think it's shrunk just a little bit over the last 30-some years, the fact is that when the the younger individuals, once they grow up and they get an education, they move off to another area, they move someplace else. And so what we have left are all of the individuals who lived here and growing older, and we have a great over 65er population. in comparison to many other communities. What that means basically is that as we get older, we get sicker, we have more problems, we have more issues, and subsequently you're going to have more calls involving heart problems, respiratory problems, and the list goes on and on. In those days, we could purchase an ambulance for about $50,000. The same exact thing today is run at about $130,000, $140,000 for the same thing. In those days, we could run that 2,000 calls with 3 ambulances, and over the years, we've had to increase our amounts of vehicles and personnel to where now we have 5 ambulances. And so, if that fact alone, if one ambulance costs $130,000, I'm speaking in generalities here, of course. But if one ambulance costs $130,000 and the whole tax levy only generates about that amount per year, it doesn't leave room for any other things. Now, the county has a contract with Logan County Paramedic Association, and it has 3 sections in it. One, it says that it will provide the ambulances, in other words, purchase the ambulances when we need them. 2, it will have enough sufficient funds in the coffers to be able to do major repairs if they're needed. And 3, that the ambulance service would be subsidized with monies in order to help it offset its innate problems with rural EMS. In other words, unlike an urban area where, even though we're running 4,000 calls a year, it's not the same as running 10 or 15 or 20,000 calls in an urban area, where they can, just volume alone, can take care of their fiscal needs. It's very usual and customary for rural EMS to have some sort of tax funds coming in to feed it and to help it stay alive and stay fiscally healthy. In fact, our neighbors next to us, DeWitt County, has a 25-cent per $100 property evaluation, as opposed to our 5-cent tax levy. And Mason County has I believe, 20-cent tax levy. And so, here we're in the middle with this small amount. Now, we've been able to make that work very well over the years, but it's gotten to the point where it's just no longer sufficient. The board, the county board, their hands are tied. They only have so much money to be able to provide to us. Yeah. And they have discovered over the last few years that there just isn't sufficient funds. And so that's the reason why we're asking for a 5-cent boost. Now, what that 5-cent boost will mean to the average taxpayer in Logan County, and they figured that on a $100,000 evaluated home, is about $15, $16 per year per taxpayer.
Let me repeat that, because it's minuscule amount, yes. And this is so important. And people, I want to emphasize, we're not talking about a bureaucracy out here. You're serving this community in a very direct way, and it's certainly not top heavy it's not heavy at all with any bureaucrats. Each and every one of you are doing a very important job, so we don't have an upper strata there that we're paying for no services.
The Logan County Paramedic Association is a not-for-profit 501c3 company. It has a board of directors of individuals who, as a community service, provides the direction to me, and we meet once a month and so forth. And those representatives on the board do not get paid for anything. They do it as a public servant, and they come in and we have representation throughout the entire county. In fact, we have a representation from Atlanta, from Mount Pulaski. We have representation from the Atlanta area, and we have had in the New Holland area. We certainly have from the Hartsburg-Emden area. And so we have representation from the entire county for this county service. And those individuals, we meet once a month, and we discuss fiscal issues and decide what's the best route to go. And these are good people. They're people that are pretty savvy. They understand what we're doing and what our credo is, why we're here. And so basically, our philosophy is we're not in the business of making money. We're only in the business of having good personnel, paying them reasonable wages and compensations, having good equipment, and training that is sufficient in order to keep us up with running things. But the fact is that it costs $1.6 million a year in order to run our organization, and obviously 90% of what we bring in is from user fees, and that's the reason why when you use the ambulance, you're going to get a bill for it. But this subsidy is a way in order to help keep us solvent and keep us healthy in a way in which we don't have to just continue to just rise our charges. It is expensive to utilize an ambulance, but I think a lot of people don't understand that really we're on a 50% reimbursement rate. In other words, for every dollar that we charge, we get back about 50 cents.
Yeah.
And that the reason for that is because of your Medicare, Medicaid, and all these types of things that reduce your charges.
So you're subject to the same problems that the rest of the world is having with trying to collect from these government entities, aren't you? Historically speaking, since we were there a little bit, I seem to recall that when we first had the paramedics here, we were the first county of this size to have a professional outfit like this, as opposed to what we remember as the funeral homes coming with. I guess they brought the hearse.
In the Dark Ages, that was passed around. The emergency calls, this month it was Holland and Berry, and the other next month it was Goff Funeral Home, and the other would be Kerrigan. They passed it around,
Right.
And now.
So we've got a pretty darn decent history going here, and which of us would like to run anything on 1970s dollars?
That's right.
And the important thing, I want to go back to that figure that you've been on. Based on $100,000 of assessed valuation, the taxpayer could expect to be about $15 to $16 addition to that. That's not very much.
No, it's not.
So it's important to point that out.
And the problem, I've had some people, when I've spoken all over the county, and I've had some people say, well, why don't you just go for a 20-cent tax levy or whatever? Here's my problem. I believe in my heart of hearts that if we ask for a 20-cent tax levy, it's too much right now. There may be a time 10 years from now where we may want to increase it a little bit more, perhaps. But I think that just asking for, dollars for no good reason, I think is not really, it's not an efficient way to spend tax dollars.
Well, you didn't sit down and discuss it at your meetings. Well, boys, it's time to have more money. Let's just have another. Let's just ask for a referendum.
Right.
That you studied this a long time.
Yes.
And you came to this as an honest decisions that this is what we have to have in order to keep it going.
That's right.
How many employees does Logan County Paramedics Association have? Because it's run like hospital and prison. It's a 24/7 deal.
It is. We have 15 full-time paramedics, and we have about that many part-time medics and EMTs throughout the county that have other jobs that come in and work for on holidays and vacations and things of that nature.
Steve, I'd like to define paramedics because I think it's important that our listeners understand these are real professionals.
Yes,
this
sir.
isn't something that we do part-time or something we earned a Boy Scout merit badge way back. So I want to emphasize that.
The training is pretty anymore. I mean, it's getting to the point where, in order for somebody to go from no training to becoming a paramedic, if you include all the class work and the field work that goes along with it, it takes, 2.5 years to get that job done. And it's pretty intensive training. One of the things that I think that's worthy of mentioning is that as of the last few years, we've been participating along with the hospital, local hospital, and 21 other hospitals around the central Illinois area. This ambulance service and some of the other advanced life support services have been participating in the Prairie Heart field. Actually, the idea is here, when somebody has a heart attack, to be able to get that person, get the heart attack identified and get that person to a cath lab in Springfield or Bloomington or Decatur or whatever, as quickly as possible. The reason why it's important is because minutes save heart muscle, which saves lives or keeps people healthier longer. And what we've entered into is that we can take a 12 lead EKG from the field, Bluetooth that to the hospital and to the cath lab in, let's say, Springfield, identify that myocardial infarction or the MI or whatever you want to call it, heart attack, and we go directly from their home or from the scene, wherever we're at, directly to the cath lab. We bypass emergency rooms. And the reason why we do that is because we can shave off anywhere from 15 to 30 minutes off of that time that it takes to get people. And Prairie Heart Institute has identified the Logan County Paramedic Association as the leader in that area because they did statistics and found that we were doing more field identifications and transports to the cath lab than any other ALS agency in central Illinois. And so they're going to give us an award this coming month for that.
Bless your hearts. Yeah. And that attributable to all this training you were talking about.
It's all part of it, yeah.
Yeah, Well, that is so nice. That is so nice. I'm glad that you're being recognized for that. You know, when we work hard towards something, it's always nice to have somebody say, "Oh, you worked hard toward that." You know, be recognized for that. Yeah. Well, I can't personally say enough about the Logan County Paramedics Association. My golly,
I thought you'd taken them to raise for a while. Your place so often.
Yeah, really. Well, and then I had to use them too when I ran over myself.
That's right. I remember that.
You may recall that incident.
Klutz that she is. She ran right over herself.
How many employees do you have?
Full-timers, with the clerical and everything, we're looking at 17 full-time people, and I think it's about 17 or 18 part-time people. So there's quite a few that come in and out of those doors. But they're running shifts. Each of the 5 full-time medics will work 24 hours, and they'll be off for 48 hours. And so at 7 o'clock in the morning, another crew of 5 rig guys will come in, and they'll go home for 2 days. But that averages out. These guys will work 56 hours per week is their average amount of work that they do. And so, you know, in order to run a service like this around the clock, it is quite expensive. You know, when you're talking about, and there's nobody here that's, you know, going to get rich. I mean,
well, not so much.
It's a calling. It's not something that
exactly.
Yeah.
But it's a commitment.
It's a commitment.
You know, really.
Yeah. And they live there at the
Most of them do. We have some that live out of town and that come in and so forth. And in the old days, when we had less medics available and so forth, you know, they were pretty much required to live in town because they were on call all the time. But we've finally gotten to the point where they work their 24-hour shift and they go home. So we have some people that live in Springfield and I don't know, different places.
Let's talk about the number of units you have. You have 5 now, and these rather pricey chariots. And is that really enough? Do you ever think, "Oops, we're out. They're all gone out in the field"?
Yes, ma'am. And that's the reason why, there's 2 reasons why we have 5 ambulances. We actually only staff 3 of them around the clock. But when 3 ambulances, that 3rd ambulance finally goes out all at the same time, we start calling in off-duty people in order to staff the 4th and 5th rigs. The other reason is because when you run the wheels off these rigs, there's something in the shop all the time. So basically, for all intents and purposes, an awful lot of times we really only have 4 rigs in the garage. There's something in the shop getting worked on. We do run a lot of mileage on these rigs, and they get a lot of wear and tear on them and so forth. But and that's just part of the thing, you know.
I'd like to go ahead, Judy. Go right ahead.
I'm sure that some of the roads that you travel aren't exactly paved highways.
Not the best.
Yes, you can try 5th Street Road, for example.
Scary.
We've had the pleasure this morning of having 2 of the best servants for the communities in which they live. Steve Siltman, in his capacity, is running the Logan County Paramedic Association, which is a great ambulance service, and as I say, almost ad nausea, the best clerk we have in the state of Illinois for the county clerks, and she's a busy lady. We're not top heavy in wages, in those two departments by any stretch of the imagination. We appreciate your presence. We always try to close Viewpoint with some comment that I've dug up from somewhere. This one happens to be about voting, which is somewhat timely today. I don't know who W.S. Gilbert is, but he says, and this is kind of important, I always voted at my party's call. I never thought of thinking for myself. Think about that, folks. Ponder that as we close and say thank you for Viewpoint. Thank you.